Good morning. I hope you're doing well today. It's Wednesday again, and we are going to have some stormy weather tonight, and it's going to bring in fall tomorrow, and I'm so excited. The weather is going to change and actually feel like fall. I think it's funny. People always tell us that we shouldn't talk about the weather and that that's like small talk. I'm fascinated by the weather. I love the weather, no matter what it's up to. So, it's not just small talk chit chat to me. I like the weather. Do you guys like the weather? All right. Today, what are we talking about today? Today we are talking, oh, there's Baxter. Hey, Bax, Bubby. Today we are talking about the relaxation response. So this is an oldie and a goodie. A lot of the research that Dr. Herbert Benson did for this book was in the 60s and the 70s. So this has been around a while. I love that he actually started out as a cardiologist, and Baxter's knocking things over now. He started out as a cardiologist, which I think is the most perfect thing for somebody who circled back and ended up studying, researching, and coining the term the relaxation response, because this, of course, is kind of being pitched as the opposite of the stress response, right? And the stress response, there are so many physical sensations that go along with the stress response. There's so many physically measurable things that happen, right? And one of those things, one of the most immediate, non-invasive, and obvious things that we can measure are things like heart rate and blood pressure. So he started out researching, and he was working with patients as a cardiologist who were interested in lowering their blood pressure. So at the same time, there was this group of transcendental meditators who were practicing and kind of caught wind that he was looking into helping people with their blood pressure and that that was his area of expertise. Now, Dr. Benson was, in the Ivy League medical schools. He was very highbrow, well-respected researcher. And he had this group of, at that time, very counterculture hippies approaching him and saying, hey, we think we have something that could be of value to you. Why don't you study us, right? Why don't you look at the effects of transcendental meditation on our, blood pressure, on our heart health? There were a whole bunch of things that he studied and researched, of course, and measured. So he kind of was dragged into researching this whole relaxation response and coining that term somewhat begrudgingly, because he was looking at this from a very doctor, medical, research scientist perspective and thinking there's got to be something that's available to us in the medical community to help people lower their blood pressure. So at long last, he says, okay, fine, I'm in. Let's do this research. Let's see what you guys got. So he starts researching. He starts working with this group of transcendental meditation practitioners. And what they find is, and what they come up with is a framework that they see these practitioners moving through and utilizing, and they see the effects that it's having on them physically, right? They're able to measure the differences in their bodies, and they're measuring things like, let me go to the right page here. Okay, they are, no, this isn't it. Well, they're measuring, okay, here we go. Sorry. Heart rate, breathing rate, blood pressure, and metabolic rate, right? They're measuring all sorts of different things. And what they're finding with the transcendental meditation practitioners is that it's not only effective with blood pressure and with lowering blood pressure, but it's effective in treating things like headaches, cardiac rhythm irregularities, premenstrual syndrome, anxiety, that's why we're here today, and mild and moderate depression. So it's having this huge range of benefits for all sorts of people, all sorts of problems. And he thinks, okay, we're really onto something here. So he comes down to the 4 essential components that he believes are necessary for somebody who wants to deliberately and purposefully practice the relaxation response. We've all gotten very good at hitting the trigger button on the stress response, that fight or flight nervous system reaction that we have when we are under a real or perceived threat, right? We're pretty familiar with that. That's something that we've gotten pretty good at over the years. And he was thinking, okay, how can we construct a practice for people that helps them literally practice, and he says, once or twice a day, the relaxation response. So he initially comes up with 4 components. The first one is a quiet environment. The second one is a mental device. The third one is a passive attitude. And the fourth is a comfortable position. What he ends up finding is that you only really need the middle 2. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is cultivating your own individual relaxation response, what that looks like for you specifically. We're all different. We all have different interests. We all have different physical capabilities. We all have things that, different seasons in our lives, different seasons in the weather that will make an impact on this. So he boiled it down to the 2 components, and I made a worksheet for you this week, of course, that lists these components for you and gives you some space to brainstorm and just some prompts about how to come up with the best relaxation response for you. And you can find that worksheet. It's at kellyhanlonmccormick.com/podcast/35. There's a link to it here in the notes for this video. So let's walk through the 2 components that he found to be the most helpful when you're really cultivating your very own relaxation response. So the first one is a mental and bodily element. So what does this mean? Let's break this down into the 2 parts. First of all, we'll talk about the mental part. So he encourages people to find whether this is a word, a thought, a phrase, maybe it's a mantra, maybe it's a prayer. It can be as short as 1 word. It can be as long as a full prayer, right? Or even just like a 1-sentence thought, whatever feels the most fitting to you. So he encourages people to find something, whatever that looks like, that they are going to return to, they're going to repeat to themselves over and over and over again. Okay? So this provides kind of an anchor for our mind to go to. Now, sidebar quickly on our minds. We are human beings with human brains. We have about 60,000 thoughts a day. So you're going to, as you move through this practice, of course, your brain is going to keep thinking thoughts. And of course, some of those thoughts, maybe even half or most of those thoughts, aren't going to be the word or the thought or the phrase that you set out to intentionally practice and repeat to yourself. That is okay. Nothing has gone wrong because your mind starts wandering off and you start thinking about, well, what's for dinner? I wonder what the kids are up to. Of course, you're going to start thinking about that stuff. The practice is in gently just bringing your attention back over and over and over again. So make sure you choose a word, a thought, a phrase, a mantra, a prayer that you're going to repeat throughout this practice. That's the mental element. So the bodily element can look like a whole range of things. And he studied people who were doing everything from jogging to knitting to walking to practicing yoga to rowing to practicing qigong or tai chi, all sorts of different movements. Swimming, you could do any kind of movement. I think it's helpful if the movement is a little bit repetitive. You'll see as you practice this that the repetition of the mantra, the repetition of the word, the repetition of the thought that you really want to practice, coupled with a repetitive movement like walking, swimming, jogging, knitting, those things, that chopping vegetables, that's another really good one. There's a repetitiveness to it that kind of just makes the whole thing kind of come together. It doesn't have to be repetitive. I think that's just, for me, it's made it a little bit easier. So the mental element is the word, phrase, thought, mantra, prayer. the bodily element is some form of ideally repetitive, but not necessarily repetitive, movement. Now, I do want to make a note here that the bodily element can absolutely be sitting still in a comfortable position. That is absolutely okay and wonderful, and it may be the most accessible, the most available, the easiest and most convenient thing for you to practice, even just some of the time, maybe all of the time, right? But do not underestimate the value of sitting in a comfortable position and having that be your bodily element. That is absolutely okay. Now, some of you are going to think, sit still? No way. And you'd much rather go for a run. You'd much rather go for a walk or a hike or a swim or, go through 10 cent citations or something. That's fine too. Just meet yourself where you're at. Know that this doesn't have to be permanent. You can change this up from day to day. You can change it up from week to week. You can change it up over the seasons, whatever feels right to you. But grab the worksheet. That's going to help you really find the mental element that works for you and a bodily element that works for you, right? Now, one more quick note on both of these things. Both the mental element, which is the word or the thought, and the bodily element, which is either how you're sitting comfortably or how you're moving your body, both of these things need to feel believable and like second nature to you. Meaning, and I use this example in the podcast, this is not the time to learn how to ride a unicycle, right? That's great. And let us know if you know how to ride a unicycle. We want a video because well done you. But if you're learning something new, right? If you're really practicing something that's saturating your attention, it's not the bodily element that you want to be practicing with the relaxation response. So this is why I come back to the most basic two bodily elements for sure are sitting and walking. Most of us don't have to think about either one of those. Most of us can do that very comfortably and very easily, and it's second nature. So definitely find something that is that easy for you. If you're an avid swimmer, maybe it's swimming laps in the pool, right? If you're an avid yogi, maybe it's doing 5 or 10 or 20 sun salutations. Whatever feels really natural to you. Now, the mental element needs to feel believable. Okay. So if you're introducing a thought that you want to be believing, right? If you're introducing a thought that you want your future self to be living into, or it's a goal or an achievement that you're really kind of chasing after and wanting, that's not going to work either. The thought or the phrase or the word needs to feel already completely and totally believable to you. Does that make sense? So, mental element, bodily element. That's step one. Step two is to bring an unattached outlook, to maintain an unattached outlook to the practice. What does this mean? Now, I give you in the worksheet a whole list of ways that you can put this into play for yourself and that you can actively practice how to stay unattached to what's happening as you're practicing the relaxation response. But the overarching idea is that you're not judging yourself. You're not worried about how it looks. You're not worried if you're doing it well or if you're doing it perfectly. You're not worried about what other people think. The most important thing is that you're practicing your word or your mantra or your phrase or your thought, and you're coming back to it over and over and over again. You're going to have to bring your attention back, and that you're really utilizing the bodily element. If it's walking, if it's running, if it's swimming, that's great. If it's sitting still, great. But let yourself sink in to whatever bodily element you've chosen, right? Really be there. Now, staying unattached and maintaining kind of this, Dr. Benson calls it in his book, he calls it having a passive attitude, right? And so it's just like watching thoughts come in, maybe watching yourself stumble a little bit. If you're walking, you trip over a rock or something, and you're just going to notice it and you're going to say to yourself, oh, well, and you're going to keep on going, right? So step one which sounds like there's a lot to it. And I do think it takes some brainstorming and some conscious creation. What do I want this to look like, right? Once you've gotten that part down, step one should be pretty easy, right? You're either walking, you're doing something that's very easy to you, and all you're doing is repeating a word or a thought. It's pretty simple. The challenge, right? The true practice of cultivating a relaxation response is in step two, where you are over and over and over again maintaining a passive attitude, right? You're maintaining this outlook on the practice that is totally unattached. It's all fine, right? So, like I said, this is a really good one to grab the worksheet. There's so much more in the worksheet and in the podcast about how to create and practice your very own relaxation response. This is one of those things that's going to look different for all of us. And like I said, allow it to be fluid, allow it to change from day to day, allow it to change from week to week. There are things that work in my life right now. Well, I've got kids at home that will look totally different when the kids are older, when the kids are out of the house. There are things that look different in summer than they do in winter. There's things that look different now that I've got a puppy than before when I didn't have a puppy. So just allow it to be fluid. Allow yourself to change with it as you need to. If you have any questions, send me a DM, send me an email. Let me know what's on your mind. I would love to chat with you about it. And most importantly, we're into the final quarter of 2019. We have 90 days left in this year, maybe even less. It's October 2nd. I haven't really done the math. There's 3 months, right? So if this is the year that you would like to finish strong, if you would like to hire your own personal trainer for your mind, if you'd like to start 2020 with a head start, right? And just get a running start on what you're going to accomplish next year, schedule a consult call with me and let's do it. kellyhanlonmccormick.com/coaching. You can find a link to my calendar there. You can find a time that's convenient for you and let's chat. So grab the worksheet, schedule a consult call. Let's work through the relaxation response together on our consult call, and we'll help you come up with the perfect practice for you so that you're practicing and focusing on the relaxation response and not the stress response. Sound good? All right. Next week, I think we're going to talk. Is it next week? Next week, we're going to start. It's going to be the first of a two-part series. We are going to do 2 episodes all about emotional decluttering. So it's going to be similar. It's going to bring in some elements of minimalism and tidying up and all the rage that we're all in with that. But we're going to bring this into some thought work and our emotions and talk about emotional decluttering. So that we're going to do part 1 next week. I will see you at the same time, same place next week when we do that. And until then, have an amazing week, guys. Bye for now.